welcome, everybody, to the Shoreline Show. We have a special guest here with us today. His name is Carlos Valladares, if I said that right.
You did. That's perfect.
We're excited to have him here, and you guys are going to learn a lot from him. We're going to be sitting here, Shelly and I, and just interviewing him. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have Carlos here.
Yeah,
because we've known each other for, what, probably 10 years now.
I would say 10 years, yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first day I met you.
Yes.
When you walked in our building, and it was like sub-zero outside.
It was.
You like cold weather, right?
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that. So, why don't you tell our audience, who is Carlos?
All right, well.
It's a big question, right?
It is. It's a big question. I would
so
say
much
it's where to start, right?
Yeah.
Where do I start? I was born in Honduras, so that already made it a little bit challenging just in general to live here. Born in Honduras, my parents were Honduran, both of them. Moved to Atlanta when I was young, so I did kindergarten in the U.S., so that's why I don't have a huge accent when I speak English. Thank you, Mrs. Mathis. She taught me my ESOL. Yeah, and then moved back, grew up until the 6th grade, and then went back to Honduras, 7th grade, and no English at that point, so my English was removed. I did the rest of my schooling at a Christian school. Became really heavily involved in church when I was 15, and went to school there, played a lot of basketball. Basketball is in my blood. I love the game. And then, went to school for computer engineering. Then I switched it to business administration and then marketing. Okay. So I did a little bit of that, and then
was that all in Honduras?
That's all in Honduras.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
That last part, I got a full ride scholarship into college, so I was really focused on my schooling, and I was doing really well. And I had a friend who we played basketball together. He says, "Hey, you speak English really well. Do you want to help us out as an assistant at a school?" I said, "I want to focus in my schooling." So, long story short, the 3rd or 4th time he says, "Come on, man, help me out." He says, "It's only me. I need someone to help me, and it's only 2 months left." And so I said, "Fine, I'll join." So I went over there, but then after that, I stayed there for, I'd say, close to 10 years. I taught at that school. I did a little bit of everything, and it's where I met my wife. Yeah. So she was from West Michigan, and she has a story where she told her mom, "I'll never marry a Honduran." And of course, those never, just like I said, I'll never live in Michigan.
Be careful what you say,
yes,
right?
the never is powerful. So that's kind of where my journey began and ended here. We did come here to West Michigan in 05, I believe, 06, somewhere in there, and I saw your winter, and that's all I needed to see. And we went back for many years, lived back in Honduras. Yes. Yeah. So, to answer who we are, who I am, I would first say I'm a Christian man with that tries to focus on values, and then my family is very important, my immediate family, and of course my new family. And then a businessman. I had a guy back in the day who go, "You're a businessman," but at that point I didn't see myself as a businessman, but he would say that to me. And then, after that, I just, try to give back to the community and help, and give back to what my experiences and helping people find a similar path. A lot of people ask me, how did you find this path, or how did you do this? So that's kind of what it's all about right now. But I, we try to keep that focus. And I would say the other thing that I probably didn't mention in there of who I am is I love sports. Yeah. Absolutely passionate for sports, mainly soccer, and then probably basketball, which is funny because that shifted. I didn't like soccer at all. And my dad loved the game, and he never saw me passionate for the game, and I just didn't like it. And my dad passed away, unfortunately, in 05. I would say a year or 2 years later, I became passionate for the game. So I love sports.
You think that was through your dad's passing that intrigued you because it was a piece of him?
I'm gonna say no. Yeah. But it was a transition when I moved back to Honduras. We were, I think, 2 weeks in, maybe less, and we were living with my aunt, and it was this colonial, think of a colonial back in the 1800s home.
Yeah,
and so it was
sweet.
very open with a lot of windows. And there was a small TV, I would say, I don't know, 25 inches. I can't recall, 29 inches, whatever the little Sonys used to be. I mean, now they're 6, right? You have to have like the
Yeah,
60,
the
right?
inch,
Yeah. Yeah, so nothing like that. And there was like 50 people around. I think it was the Honduras-Mexico match. And I couldn't believe the passion behind every play, let alone a goal.
Yeah.
I mean, it exploded. And it wasn't the explosion of the 50 people. There was people looking through the window.
Oh, wow.
It was the explosion of the whole like neighborhood, and the fireworks would go off. And so we actually beat Mexico that day, and everybody got in their car and went to it's called like a boulevard over there, and just started screaming and yelling and driving like at 5 miles an hour with their
How
flags
cool
and
is
their
that?
shirts. So that kind of definitely woke me up. Like,
Yeah.
what is this, right? You just
Yeah.
you didn't see that. I mean, here it was the Super Bowl and baseball. I love baseball, and I love football. I mean, I won't miss a Super Bowl. But that's what I knew. So when I went down there, I thought that was. So I'm definitely passionate about the game now. And of course, Honduras being a soccer country, all my friends were passionate about it. But I still rejected it just because of basketball, right?
Yeah.
It kept
You had
me.
a passion for basketball.
I
That
did.
was your heart was.
Yeah.
I did. But I mean, just in general, I love sports, and soccer's probably, I mean, my wife can tell you there's a few things in there that show off that how passionate I am about the game.
So do you still play anything?
So I played. Well, you're touching a hard subject there.
Yeah.
Because I would say this year I finally admitted that I'm kind of done playing. I'm going to run a half a marathon in Patagonia. So
Wow, that's
that's
champion
kinda
right
new.
there. That's beast.
But it was mainly because I would go back to the game. And the first time I went back, it was like, I mean, I was playing top level. And then I would go in 2 days later, and it's like, I didn't even know how to play. You know, everything I could airball, just terrible. And so that third day, I'd play harder just so I don't repeat the bat, and then you'd see an injury, right? And then it
Yeah.
would take me like 2 weeks, 3 weeks to recover. And it was like a cycle similar to that, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, you know, I
think
I
I'm
need to be
done.
done. So I'm running now a little bit and trying to, because, you know, I still need that, keep moving around.
Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
Exercise.
but yeah, I watch a lot of it, and I love watching my kids play, so.
Do you feel like sports and you being in sports have grown you to be the entrepreneur you are? Do you think they played a factor in that?
That's a great question. That's because, I mean, absolutely. Sports, to me, entitles so many of those traits or skills that you would need as an entrepreneur, right?
Absolutely.
One is to realize you have support around you. You're not
Yeah.
alone, right? Well, again, this is from a collective sport, right? There's
Right.
definitely, you know, some sports where you do kind of, you're on your own. But in general, most sports are collective. One is to push yourself. You can do more.
Yeah.
Right? Another one is a coach. How important is a coach in a collective
Yeah.
game, right? Do we need a business coach? Absolutely. I mean, that
Absolutely.
makes the difference. So, yeah, I mean, you touched on something that I would 100% say that playing sports is very much perseverance, right? Responsibility, discipline, integrity, right?
Right.
When you're in those hard moments, the pressure, you know, it's a tight game. Like, what do you do under pressure?
Right.
How do you drop the nerve? I mean, I can go on and on.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of correlation there for the two. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things is you don't always get what you want. Your coach
Right.
is going to make decisions based on what he feels is right. I think it teaches you a lot when it comes to that is you put in the hard work, you put in the effort, but ultimately it's a team effort and what's the best for the team.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, for
good.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. no, it
Awesome.
is.
So, let's see. How about let's hear a little bit about your journey on immigrating from Honduras to the U.S. and what was that
That's wild.
like?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not
Right.
that's not an everyday thing for a lot of people here.
Right.
You've grown a successful business here,
Right.
which is wild. I see everything you're doing, and not only it's you're in it for yourself. What you said earlier, you definitely can feel that you've been in it for the community.
Thank you.
And you I get that feel from everything you've done. So
you. Yeah.
like how was that and like that mindset of you shifting over and what were some of the challenges and things like that?
Yeah. So mind you, and I won't talk too much about this, but when I was growing up, we transitioned a lot. My parents would move us from, I mean, pretty much constantly every 2-3 years, sometimes even sooner. So migrating, you know, we came to the U.S. I didn't know any English, right? So it was all, they pushed me into an all English school.
Yeah.
And so it took me a little bit, but I embraced it. Then I went back to Honduras, and I didn't know as much Spanish in the formal and the Honduras history, and I went to an all Spanish school. And then I came back here in 2005, 2006, where my wife would show me Michigan summers. I'm like, okay, these are awesome. But then the winter hit, I'm like, no, I'm out. So I went back. So this last time in 2013, we come back, and of course, the hardest winter hits. Okay, I mean, well, for me and for a lot of people, right?
It was so cold.
It was bad. It was like, welcome back. It was a great welcome back.
Yeah. We all have the same thoughts, just so you know, on our end.
I noticed
we
that.
need to get out of here.
I noticed that. Everybody's on the and it's the February, March that really gets you. But so for me, it was, new. It was not nearly as cold as when I moved back. And I'm like, we had so much snow. It was freezing. All these new names I learned. What do you call them? What is it? Arctic freeze. Like all these new words in my vocabulary. To me, cold was cold, and there's a million ways, right? To say that. So I moved back, and
El Nino or something.
So it was quite the transition. And when I came back, I had 2 suitcases I checked. That was it. Yeah. And my goal was to get a job. And so while I was searching for a job, I'm the one to push. I don't stop. So it's 2 a.m. and I'm still applying, right?
Notice that.
And my wife, she decided to stay home. There's 3 kids. And she said, you know what, I'm going to stay home for a little bit. She was getting job offers left and right. So that was really hard for me, because I'm thinking, like, I'm trying really hard to just get my first job, right? Yeah. And she's not trying, and she easily, I would dare say, received 12 offers.
Wow.
While I received 0. So finally, through a church we were going, I was able to sub, as I was a sub, and they loved it. They wanted me to stay, but they told me to go back to school to get a certificate. I'm saying, I've been in school for 10 years, college, right?
Yeah.
I'm done for a little bit.
But it wasn't U.S. college, so they didn't recognize it?
Correct.
Oh, that's wild.
It was the teaching certificate, because they wanted me to teach and be with, right? And so even though I loved it, because there weren't a lot of guys in that elementary level, and you could tell the kids had this special connection.
Well, I know that some of the things that we used to volunteer. I used to volunteer at a school, and that is a big struggle of like men leaders to step up in the school, and I think that there's a high demand for that. Even to this day, there's a huge demand for it.
Agreed. We could definitely go down that road, because there's many reasons for that. But bottom line, I think I interviewed like 10 times, and we could not get to an agreement, which was honestly the best thing that could have happened. I think God had something, bigger for me, right? And so it was hard, because that was my only opportunity. Believe me, I applied. I have stories to tell where. I'll make this one short. I was invited to Chicago, all expenses paid, all shows, went to watch the Cubs shows. I mean, probably $3,000 at the time for a position they wanted to hire, but that didn't work out. So a lot of things they didn't work out. So the transition was hard, because as pressure came on, because we were living on savings, which thankfully we've always had the culture of saving. We were living on savings, and the pressure came on around September, I believe. And I went back to what my grandfather said. My grandfather was a very successful businessman in Honduras, and he would tell me, work hard, nothing comes back empty. And those words just resonated with me, right? That. Just work hard, nothing comes back empty. Work hard. So you have to reap. You can't work hard and not reap. It's natural, right?
Yeah. Right.
Now, of course,
it's a biblical verse, right?
Correct.
Yeah, you reap what you sow, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I used that to push through. And then the other thing that resonated with my grandfather was, one time he offered me, he knew I needed some money, and he said, I can help you. And I said, here we go. He's going to cut a check, right?
Yeah,
and
awesome.
That didn't happen.
Not so much.
He gave me the lesson of my life. He said, do you know how to drive a tractor? These weren't little farm tractors. These were massive tractors where you took out sand and things out of. You know, I don't know what they call them, some poundage, right? Just massive tractors. I said, no, I don't know. He says, I have a tractor that's down. Do you know how to fix a tractor? I said, no, I can't fix a tractor. And I think on and on, he gave me like 3 more tasks. And he looks at me, he goes, you're not ready yet. He says, you have a lot to learn. And that, you know, that really hurt me in many ways. And to the point where I don't know if I was angry with him or resentful, but at the time, you know, I was 17, 18, 19, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And, you know, that just played a part where when you don't feel valuable as a human, but it also opened up my, like, wait a minute, I have to become valuable. Either you become a victim or you embrace it. And I said, no, I'm going to become valuable and I'm going to learn. And you know, that's kind of what kicked off when I sat back one night and I said, what can I do? What can these hands do? And that night, I just felt God, you know, remind me of what I was capable of. And I knew how to build websites, I knew marketing, and I knew digital. And so I put it all together, and that's kind of where we kicked off.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, a tough year. And
sometimes I find that, you know, it's one of those things where we all want to solve, and as you have kids now, I know you have kids, and it's like we want to solve their problems and not let them hit that ground hard, or we are afraid. I see a lot of parents these days that are afraid of hurting their kids' feelings or letting them hit the ground hard.
Yeah.
But I think in those moments when you hit that ground hard, that thing of your grandpa came back, or was it your dad or your
grandfather? Yeah,
grandfather came back, and you're like, I am valuable, even though you didn't feel it at that time.
Right.
And what am I valuable in? Which is huge.
Right.
Which is crazy to think about. That developed who you are and where you're at, your business today.
Yeah.
So thank you, Grandpa.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No kidding. I mean, and think about it. The easy thing would have been to cut me a check, and on I go on, right?
But it wouldn't
that would have been the worst thing that could have happened.
Wouldn't have helped you at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard because as a parent, right, you want to help in the moment.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know, even again, coming from a Christian perspective, God does that in so many ways. Like, yeah, he could fix everything, you know, like, but that's not the point.
Right.
You know, the point is that we discover ourselves, that we work hard, that we value. And then when I always say this to my kids, when you sit down and enjoy whatever it is, you know, your food, whatever it is, but you worked them with your own hands, there's more value to that than when someone's just giving it to you.
100%.
Right?
Absolutely.
And you can't, it's even hard to explain. You have to experience that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this question kind of is right from what you're talking about. So, what motivated you to start your own business? And how did your background influence your journey? And so
I mean, I guess what I would plug in there, because we did discuss it a lot, would be just necessity, right? Like putting food on the table.
Right.
Like there's a pressure there of like,
you weren't getting a job anywhere else, so you had to do something.
Yeah, we leased an apartment here in Allendale, and it was a small apartment, you know, 1 bathroom.
Yeah.
And one of the things I have to say is my wife was just amazing through it, right? She was never like, she's supportive through the whole journey. And that's really important, because when you have pressure, you know, of maybe like, oh, we're not, you know, we expected this and we're getting this. To receive support at that point is important, you know, as a father and as a husband. And she supported me there, and I remember her whole family was nervous, like, what's going to happen? Mind you, we moved in here I didn't have a job.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I had not made probably more than $1,500 a month. And I'm moving into an apartment with 3 children. My wife is pregnant.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay. And you know, no certainty other than the Lord says this is the next step. And so we moved in there, and I sit with her, I would say within a week, maybe 2, I don't know. Right, the first days I sit with her and I said, we're going to make a budget. And so we made a budget, and it was $4,000. I mean, that's a lot. Now,
and you were bringing home $1,500.
Right. And in Honduras, minimum wage, we were actually doing really well in Honduras. Financially, we were well in Honduras, which people think that, you know, there's countries that might not be as successful as the U.S., but you're okay financially, and the cost of living isn't as high.
Right.
So we were actually doing really well in Honduras. And $4,000 at that time was close to what we call 80,000 lempiras, which is, again, it's unheard. It's a lot of money. But, you know, we looked at it, we looked at the budget, and I said, all right, I'm going to get you $4,000 at the end of the month. And I'm proud to say we never looked back.
That's insane.
That was it. You know, like I never looked back. Every single month, I would bring back the 4,000. How, Lord, you know, how God. Now, of course, there's stories in between, right? Like I slipping and the winter and all these things, but that was it. You know, you set a goal and you go, what is it you want? All right, go get it. And if the job's not done, I can't sleep. Let's go get it. Yeah. You know, but of course with the idea of growth and finally just going back into a regular routine. Right. But sometimes that's what it takes at the beginning. Just you gotta break ground. So
it's cool hearing your story because I mean this wasn't like scripted hearing at all what you're about to say on any level whatsoever. And it really drives home to me, to be honest with you, because I feel like we all are entitled on some level. Right. We all are. Yeah. I mean, the fact is you did live in Honduras, but you did have a family, you had these things, and there's people that always have it worse, right? And I think about it, and I'm like, how? But then when you move here, and you're supplying a life now for your family, right? And your kids see this lifestyle, and I think that the thing that's hard is to figure out how to get the next generation to understand what those sacrifices that you had to make. And I'm sure you battle that a little bit because you see your kids, you're like, well, I want that, and they get it because you can bless them that way. But at the same time, it's like, but I want you to understand the sacrifice. And I was sitting in with my kids the other day in the hot tub trying to explain them to them is like what it took for me to get to where I am, because I didn't come from anything. We barely had food. And it was one of those things where kind of hearing the same thing coming from you, but and I think I was more privileged than you were by far. I didn't have to come across different countries and all this wild and crazy stuff. And it's like I'm hearing kind of that same kind of story, and it's like, wow. And I be curious to hear your take on how you like, if you're seeing that in your kids, and like how do you implement it? And it's almost like letting them hit that ground hard.
Yeah, that's a great question because you have to be. I don't necessarily want them to go through everything I did. Like it's their, you know, it's a new journey for them. But you did hit it on the spot where you want to be careful to not make them entitled, or just like, what do you want? Here you go. So I'm very. One of the things is to communicate with them and help them understand, right? I think another big one is we travel together and we'll go to places where they can now see that. You know, it's different here. You know, they live differently. And I think the other part is that we focus as a global is economy dictates so much. And I don't believe economy should dictate as much as it does, but naturally it does, right? Because, you know, where are the values, where are those things that are not tangible, they're hard to see, and it's very much like a diamond. Like you have to go in and search for it, or gold. That's what brings that value up. And so at an economical level, I try to not always, I'll say to them, there's no money for that, for example. And so they know there's money, right? But I tell them there's no money for that. Right? Or I'll say, no, the value is not there, or no, we're not going to do this. And then I'll explain it to them why. I mean, I can give you some examples, even with my son. You know, he lost his phone, dropped in a pond. I had given it to him. He had to work to pay me my phone back, and then he had to continue to work to pay for his own phone. Nice. And so, you know, it was, you know, first I gave it to him.
But you feel mean, like as a father, don't you? Like that's what I run into personally. Is like sometimes you'll do things and you're like, oh, I feel awful for this, because everybody just wants to give their kids the world. But those people that choose to do that actually are hurting them long term. I think you're building and instilling something in your kids at that moment that I don't think was an easy decision for you. Or was it?
Well, my personality, it was. It wasn't like my wife and I. Well, and go figure, for the girls, I have the soft heart. And for the boys, she has a soft heart, right? So in this case, but when it comes, you know, if you would have said my daughter did that, I don't know how I would have naturally reacted. I probably would set that standard. But, you know, we tried to touch on I mean, you're touching on something that is... Look at how America was built 4 generations ago, where they were. Look, 8 generations ago, where they were. And you are starting to see that transition. So we just have to be careful. And I think one of the ways to do it is we have to, I believe, fall back into biblical principles, because the biblical principles will help you teach them. Yeah. And then there's a ground and there's a base. Yeah. So when you have a base to fall back on, I mean, going back to sports, right? If you don't ever forget your fundamentals, you're in good shape. Yeah. But once you start leaving your fundamentals, it's like maybe you'll win, but then, hey, let's go back to some fundamentals. And so I think for us, trying to go back to those fundamentals is important. And the other thing is, I don't give them, what do you guys here in the American culture? It's so if they take out the trash, what do you give them? Allowance.
I don't either.
So we don't give allowances. It's like, hey, you live here, you need to collaborate. We're a family. This is part of your job, a responsibility. And if they do something outside of their responsibility, like organizing something, they get paid because it's they're doing more than expected. Yeah. And so those little things, I think, they keep with. So and again, I think it's for us as parents, true love that is the best, I believe, way to show them that you love them. And of course, at the moment, they won't feel it. They'll feel that instant emotion, but it's when they get into their older years, they go, thank you. Yeah. So I think that's important too.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Very cool. You have a great family. Your kids are adorable.
Thank you.
They're getting big though now. What are their ages right now?
Yes. My son, the oldest, is 15. Then you have my daughter, who's 12. Yeah. Then you have my Caleb, which is 10, and then Alina's 8.
Wow.
So 15 down to 8.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nobody really ever teaches you how to raise teenagers, do they?
No.
That's one thing me and my wife always talk about, where it's kind of a joke in our house, but it's true. Yes. That's one thing that's not talked about, is how to raise teenagers.
Yes.
And our oldest, he's going to get his license in 5 or 6 weeks. So we're in the same boat, and it's like just trying to teach him the fundamentals of like what life is about and not being so entitled on some of the things. Like, right, like they were sitting in the backyard. He was talking to a buddy the other day, and we tell him constantly, don't sit on the hot tub cover because it'll crack. Yeah. And we just bought it this year, and it cracked, and we're like, well, that's going to cost you $500, right? And he has to pay that. I'm like, think about it. That's 5 days of you working 8 hours a day. Yeah. Like, that's a lot. You know what I mean?
It's very similar,
It's like crazy. So I get what you're talking about. So I really appreciate your style a lot. It's pretty impressive, for sure.
Yeah, we try. Yeah. Yeah, and you said it. I think when they hit the teens, you don't expect it. You don't see it. It's almost right, and it's that challenge. Yeah. But I think one of the things we don't see is they're going through a process, but so are we.
Yeah.
Big time.
Right? And so you're trying to help them, and you're like, wait a minute, I need to work on myself, because I was very impulsive in many
I feel like
ways.
That on a daily basis.
Right? So it's like, I need to
wait a second, I gotta be an adult in this situation. Right. I can't react like a kid like they are.
Yes. And it's true. Like one minute they're 15, the next minute they're 4, and they're pouting. Yeah. And for me, it's like, okay, what do I do? He's a grown, almost man, and he's pouting. Like, I want to just grab him, like shake him, like, come on, wake up, get out of this trance. But you can't. And so one of the things that has helped me is I walk away from the situation for a little bit, and then I try to approach him later that day. Yeah. And we have a conversation. And that has worked probably the best.
Because everybody's calmed down.
Yes, the emotions are down. But that's not me naturally. So really there's a change in me, which has helped me understand, and become more mature. So I definitely it's two ways. You have a teen, but as an adult, you're also transitioning into a whole nother level.
Well, it sounds like, which I don't think a lot of families have what you have as well, and that's it's this, you're a communicator. It sounds like you're constantly communicating with your wife, your kids, because you even said, like you mentioned earlier about you talking to your wife and her working through that, and you're constantly talking through even I'm willing to bet that you're talking through your thought process even with your kids. Like, this is what I think, and it's like you're it's not one of those things where it's like either just straight discipline or straight like not talking about it, where I think a lot of people may do. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting.
I'd like to take credit and say that I've always been that way, but I didn't see that example in my parents. So it's something I've learned along the way, especially in marriage. My wife could say I could definitely communicate a little more. But yeah, I mean, that's what it is. And I think the other thing that's very, very important, and I definitely want to mention this because I feel like in the communities, it's a key word that I believe strongly that we need to embrace a little better, and it's tolerance.
Yeah.
Right? We're not tolerant. Like if someone thinks different than I do, it's an explosion. Like that's not unreal. And it's like, no,
you're
it's
not
okay.
Democrat or Republican, or you think somewhere in the middle, you're in trouble.
I didn't even know what that was when I came here. Like, are you a Republican? I don't know.
I don't know what I am.
But I did want to hear the concept. Like, what do you believe in?
Yeah,
so and so. But it's what do they want to work towards?
Yeah.
You know, and I love having conversations. I truly enjoy those conversations with people that are different than I do.
I do.
You know, it's
it's good.
I want to learn. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to accept it, but I want to hear their point of view.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have changed my point of view because I allowed the conversation to happen. I'm like, oh, I'd never seen it that way. Okay.
That's good.
But I feel like that tolerance is what allows, just be respectful and allow that. So when you have teens, the tolerance, kind of has to go up a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No,
awesome. Awesome. Let's talk a little bit more about your business again. When you started your company, you based it on the things that you knew how to do.
Right.
But you had to look at those things and what problems were you aiming to solve?
Right.
Because really that's what, like
is.
if you're doing business, you're solving somebody's problem.
It is. And that's so important because when I first started the business, honestly, it was to put food on the table, right? To get the 4,000 I mentioned.
Absolutely.
But then you go, wait a minute.
Yep.
You do your mind also needs to shift. Just like, what am I doing here? What is it that I'm solving? Mm-hmm. What is my value? What is it that I'm bringing to people? And so I think within, I would say 2 years in business, I realized I'm helping a lot of small businesses that had no way of, let's say, affording a $25,000 agency. And because, I did some competitive analysis. I did some benchmarking. I understood that. So it was, how can I structure this to where, you might not be getting a team of 15 people and this really awesome campaign, but maybe you didn't need that either because you didn't want to spend 25, 50 grand to begin with. You just wanted to kind of get out of I don't want to, necessarily use one person who, I want to use an agency I can afford. So that really clicked in about year 2 or 3. And I said, you know what, I'm going to start packaging these solutions so that there's enough value that it's, with absolutely, yes, let's start tomorrow. And so that's kind of what we did there. We started saying, all these small businesses, these are the mom and pop shops. And I can't tell you how rewarding it is because I'll do consulting once in a while. And, I'll do consulting for corporate. And we have some corporate work naturally. Nothing wrong with it, but it's very impersonal. At the end of the days, it's numbers, right? You want to make sure you hit the numbers and continue. And it's great. That's fun to hit those goals. But to help someone who's putting food on the table for his family and maybe his kids are now taking over the business and helping those businesses, that's just awesome. It's just very rewarding. So we focus most of our solutions for the small business. And
I remember having long conversations with you way back then. And you're like, man, these people's websites are horrible. And, and I think I can help them. And I know that's...
Well, and they had great service. Like branding is all about appearance in a way, right? It's like, and so a lot of these people, they wouldn't step foot in the shop, even though it was an amazing shop, because they would look at the website and then be like, I don't want to, they're not trustworthy.
Yeah, I'm not going to go them because did you see their website? They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, it doesn't come off pro.
Right, correct. It didn't come out. So then you went in there and you helped these little small mom and pop businesses look like they were amazing big companies.
Yeah.
And they didn't really even change. They still did all the same service.
And I think you also recognized...
had a different face.
Yeah.
I think you also recognized in the feel of you taking that step and that bold to come up with that 4,000. I think you recognized at that time that small business isn't easy.
Right.
It's a hard thing to do, and there is challenges that come up.
Yes.
And you're like, if I can help get these people to the next level,
yes,
ultimately, hopefully they spend more money with you, right, in the future, and they continue to use you, and that relationship establishes. But along with you understanding you're actually helping them, where they might not be hit with a $25,000 bill, because let's be honest, most small businesses don't have an additional $25,000 at that matter.
Or it's risky.
It's a huge risk.
It brings the risk up.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's good.
What are some challenges that you've faced in growing your business?
I mean, we've talked about growing businesses from the ground up, and I look at some businesses where, let's say there was some infrastructure or something there. I had one laptop and that was it, right? So when you say challenges, I'd have to go way back. I mean, it was, I would say, one was understanding the culture I was in, right? I think I didn't, understand all the Dutch jokes and all the Dutch,
Dutch bingo.
Right. I mean, what I knew from the Dutch was they had an awesome soccer team, and I loved watching Dutch soccer. But I didn't understand the culture. And then the other part I knew was, the get-togethers and the big, everybody gets their meals and the big families, right? That's what I understood. But when it came, So when it came to business, I didn't really understand the way they saw the digital age per se. And so that was a learning curve for me where, some people would ask me, why do I need a logo? And I'm thinking, at this time of age, if I'm explaining why someone needs a logo, they're really, a little bit far behind. And so I kind of said, you know what, I'm going to make these easy to understand and introduce these packages so it's adopted a little quicker. And then, like you said, or you mentioned, just growing together and try to and then the other part I noticed too that was a challenge is, of course, breaking ground, your first clients, because a lot of them want to see, well, what have you done? Show me your work, right? So that's definitely hard in an entrepreneur because you don't have that experience underneath you. But once you do, then it's easy. I remember one of I think it was our third client. He didn't want me there. He was, what do you want? I said, can I show you something? And he wouldn't want me to make it quick. He wanted me out of there. He wanted to get back to work. So I pulled up the computer. I showed him the website I had just built. And he looked at me, goes, you did that? I said, yeah, I did that. He looks at me again, he goes, you did that? I said, yeah, I did that. I can do that for you. All right, let's do it. And today,
you're like, yes.
One of my best clients today.
Yeah,
I mean,
awesome.
he does the whole thing. He does advertising, website, social media, email, the whole thing. But, it was hard for me to like, if I wouldn't have that example, nothing would have happened. So I think breaking ground is one, and then hiring would be my second big one, right? Because there's pay. Now it's not about me, the 4,000 I mentioned earlier. Now it's like, no, wait a minute, you have to have some extra for that next person, and you can't fail them because they go before you.
Right.
I can take home 1,000 or zero, but they need to. So I think that was definitely. I hate debt, so we're not. I don't touch debt, and that to me was scary, but thankfully, that wasn't.
What's interesting is I hear what you say about you took this huge risk. You have 1,500. You see you need 4,000. Now you want to take this other person. What I see over and over again, there's this other big name speaker that I listen to. His name's Jesse Itzler. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He started a bunch of these companies, and one of his biggest things is you started with this laptop, right? Right. And you don't have. I see a lot of people, they'll want to have all these special tools, and they don't feel like they have enough.
Right.
You are enough.
Right.
And that's what and you're gonna bank on yourself to get the job done, right? And you like we could sit there and say, okay, when we started this podcast, we're fortunate enough where we were able to get some of the equipment that we needed. But the fact is, there's people that really hit it big just off a cell phone,
right?
Just shooting their content with a cell phone, right?
Yes.
So it's just interesting to me where it's like I see it over and over again where you're like, I realize that I am enough. I just got to put in the work, and I'm going to take the risk and bank on myself, and which is huge. Yeah. And there's a lot of risk behind that. But it's just
and to add to that, I think it's important too that one, when you are making money, make sure you treat the business as its own entity, because it will need funds. Right? A lot of people think it's my business and I'm going to clear it out at the end of the year. And no, wait. What are your goals for the next year, next 5 years? And based on those goals, you need to make sure you have enough funds for you. That's your baby, right? You take care of that. And so you don't take all that out. So I think that's important to add in there for understanding that the business has its own needs, and you have to listen and be ready, because the business does have a way of communicating to you.
Absolutely.
And so that's really important as well.
Yeah.
That's good.
Awesome. So since you started, I know you started like just doing mom and pop type stuff, but you're doing much more than that now.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of your notable success stories or milestones that you've hit in your company.
Yeah, I would say when I first started, one of the goals was to hit about 25 accounts, right? And then just kind of step away. So I remember hitting about 100 accounts, and I said, all right, I want to go into study theology. So I went to Calvin College and started studying theology for like 2-3 years. It was awesome. It was great. I learned so much. And then one of the people that helped me introduce to some of his accounts, he's my wife's cousin, her husband. He was working somewhere else and he was available. I said, hey, do you want to join? Let's make this happen. And so that was a transition, because I had taken my foot off the pedal. Okay. I was kind of comfortable, right?
Yeah,
and I wasn't really trying, right? And we had, I think, 3 or 4 on payroll. That was it. I mean, I was comfortable. And now I was studying theology. I was super passionate about this. But he came in and he was ready to go and get accounts. And so he did. So him and I would go to many places. And I think we grew 100 accounts real quickly. So that was the transition, because at that point, we didn't have the infrastructure internally to handle that many accounts. So we transitioned into new software, new process, new quality checks. So that was a big transition for us. And then we also started getting accounts that, they weren't the mom and pop shops. And we started having really good relationships with these companies. Like Wix was one of them. Everybody thought of Wix at the time, where they weren't, just the simple do-it-yourself websites. I saw them in 2007, and I was about to call it quits on them because they were too simple and they didn't have the infrastructure. And every time I was going to pull the plug, they came out with something new. And so they actually approached me in 2016, 17, everything, and I thought it was a scam, but it was them. And we started having a really good relationship with them. So that was another big transition for me, where I started to travel and see them in Europe and New York and all these places. And I'm, they're sending me to these soccer games because they sponsor Manchester City. So that was a kind of an eye opener for me.
I remember you doing all that.
That's
like,
crazy.
Man.
So that was another big transition. And definitely, COVID was a challenge, but it was a digital age. So for us, it was fortunate, but it was unfortunate for the majority, which is not what you want to see. But that was a challenge on its own too, because of the uncertainty. So there's definitely, along the road of everything, there's definitely that challenge in those goals.
To hit on that Wix thing, one of the things that I hear, and it's just interesting, is you stuck it out with them. And the reason I think you stuck out with them is because you can have somebody that has some challenges.
Yes.
And you're okay with people having challenges, or companies, but you've seen that they had a personality or in the company.
Constant improvement.
Yes. They weren't stopping. Yes. So you're like, okay, I know that they're not what I want them to be right now, but I see where if they continue in their heart and where they're going, that they're going to be this thing that's unstoppable, because they're not going to stop, because it's not who they are.
Correct.
And then you're like, and I want to be part of it. So you double down on them. You're like, I'm going to stick with this company.
Yes. And they saw that as well, because they go like, this guy trusts us. He's putting all, and so it was a great, so I would interview with them for hours. They'd call me and we would just talk on the phone for hours. And I would help them improve their dashboard, because they wanted feedback, right? We're the users.
Yeah.
And so they were. It was a two-way street. But yes, absolutely. To see. To me, it's important that you never stop. Even though I had a small stop in my business when I went back to theology, I just never saw my business as I never thought getting hundreds of accounts. that wasn't in my goal was to have more time for my family. That was my number one goal, was to have enough, afford enough, and say, you know what? And I did. I had hours, and I spent so much time with my family, and I'm able to get away with them. So the goal was there. But then after we start this growth, it's like, okay, it's not about me anymore. I have to start thinking about the people that work here. And that was mind-changing for me, because it was like, okay, I'm all set, but what about the people that work here? Are they all set?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not about me anymore. And that's where kind of true leadership kicks in, where you're like, okay, I need to start servicing the company and start servicing the people that are working here. And so that created a whole nother, challenge and mindset. So
that's pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's, you can hear your heart all the way through everything you do, that you have a passion for people, and it's pretty cool. I think that's where a lot of big businesses start to lose that in time. And I think that, some of them hold on to it really well as well. So it's one of those things where at the end of the day, the core of what we are is we're in the business of people, caring about people, right? Really what it comes down to. I say it all the time. It doesn't matter what you're selling, what product you're doing. If you have the right people you care for, you got the right team, you can do anything you want to do, because it's just about growing people. I mean, and their passions of what they want to do.
Yeah, that's a great way of seeing it. I agree. Wholeheartedly.
So, in your opinion, what are the biggest opportunities for potential disruption in your industry?
So I've never been good at predicting things. I would say I'm terrible at it. For example, through COVID, I thought the house pricing was gonna tank, and it did the opposite. Every time I tell you it's not gonna rain, it showers real hard. So I'm definitely not good at predictions. Always failed at those, but definitely I do feel like I'm very visionary, where I see it before it happens in a lot of areas. Now in business, I would say today, and it is a hot topic, is AI. And the way I see AI is, I love it. Let's embrace it. I feel like I always have. So, when algorithms came out, people were like, what is this algorithm? Why is it communicating with me now? And it's not a person. And that's what an algorithm does. It interprets what you're looking for. And so then we had the automatic car washes, we had the computers, we had the Facebooks. All that is based on algorithm. And so this AI is basically compiling and generating. I'm no expert on AI, but I have kind of an understanding of a little bit of the background. And so for us as an agency, we've embraced it. And so one of the things we do is, hey, if we can deliver your project a little sooner, instead of it being 1,000, it's probably going to be 500. Right. So it's great for the end user, and I can basically get through more projects through AI. So I want to be able to embrace it, and not 100%, but what I see, it cuts down on time. Yeah. And so I think that if that's going to help the end user, now will it disrupt the whole industry? We have to be careful, especially with designers on the picture side. I am a little concerned about that one. Because it is generating some pictures so I think on the designer, the photography, which I'm not heavily into photography, I think the photography side might be disruptive. As far as the agency side on specific designs, there's still too much critical thinking and too much emotion. Think of how much emotion is tied to a logo. I deal with some people where they do not want to change their logo, right? Their son designed it, their daughter designed it, right? There's so much. And so
they're
the
so
emotions
emotionally
are
attached to this thing.
Correct. And so AI to me is still more of it comes out as a supporting tool where you're still going to need that human element in many ways.
Absolutely.
Except for photography. I think, and you still do, but I'm a little afraid of where that's headed, because remember, photography is licensed pictures and a photographer. And if AI can recreate most of these and just take multiple elements and generate something for you, that's scary in many levels. Not just in an agency level or a photographer level, but at politics, at misunderstandings.
How many times have we seen it? We see an image come up on social media and everybody thinks it's one thing. But it was just generated.
Right. Well, and now they had to put they had to put where that image was from. But even now, if you do that one, because these are images that you had to actually take a picture back in the day, right? And
Yeah.
you can modify it a little bit,
Right.
or it would take you hours to really recreate and make it look real. Hours. We're talking in seconds. This thing can do
Yeah.
that. So photography, that would be a question definitely for, I think, a photographer coming into the industry. And I have had a few conversations with them, and I know they're upset. They're upset because it's I'm not going to call it illegal, but it's borderline, right? Because
Yeah.
it's fake.
Yeah,
It's not real.
Who owns the rights to that photo? You know,
Right.
is it the AI creator? Is it the person putting the data in to create the image?
Right.
You know, and I think that you're going to see a lot of laws come out
Yes.
where they're going to have to figure this out. I think the
Yes.
government's still stepping in and saying, okay, where do we fit and what do we need to put in there? Because that's the issue you're going to run into. I mean, I believe AI in general is going to disrupt a lot of things in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, I had somebody call me recently, and they were really worried about the 5G thing. And, you know, you have two choices the way I look at it. You either embrace it
Yeah.
or you revolt against it.
Yeah.
But the only analogy that came to my head was if you turn around and emissions, right, is really bad for you.
Yeah.
If you go out to your car and you turn on the car and you put your mouth over the back exhaust, it's bad for you. We know it's not good for the environment, but we do because we want to compete, right? I want to make sure I get home in 5 to 10 minutes. I don't want to spend 45 minutes getting home or 3 hours by horse and buggy. There's only one culture that I know that's still doing horse and buggy, and that's the Amish, and they're even starting to evolve into some things. I'm starting to see with cell phones and things now. So it's one of those things where you have to make a decision. Could you imagine nuclear war? Nobody likes to talk about that. Really scary. What if the United States chose, or some of these free countries chose not to be involved in the nuclear war? We would be taken over, right? We wouldn't be able to compete, right? So you have to be in the game a little bit, and some level to compete against it. And I know that's a touchy subject, but so I believe everybody's gonna have to embrace AI at some point. But just digital land, digital worlds, like things like that, we're going to go in that direction. Could you imagine if a school system chose to stay out of that, but another school system chose to get involved in it? And the school system that got involved in it, you're able to take these students and take them to take them through the moon, to have them experience things that maybe it's different countries and all these things through artificial intelligence and virtual reality, that these virtual worlds that people could go into. I think I don't think we're gonna have a choice.
We're not going to stop it.
No.
But it's just figuring out how to go forward cautiously and responsibly.
The good news is I believe you're always going to need humans, right? I don't think that that's a thing where it's like, we are on Earth, even at the very least, as a consumer standpoint, right? So, we are here doing things. We are part of what we're doing.
The only thing that's scary about the whole artificial intelligence thing to me is, when does it get to the point that the artificial intelligence that's out there, however it is, when do they get to the point where they've gained so much knowledge that they can start thinking for themselves?
Well, my thought on that is I started thinking about this like Christianity, because it sounds like and people worry about this, and I've always been one, as I'm a Christian as well, is I've always embraced science. I don't think you're going to outprove anything that isn't. Truth is truth. So if AI starts to say I can compile data, some of the data should, in theory, work for humanity, not against humanity.
Hopefully.
You would think. Because we're the original program. Where essentially, when it comes down to the core of what it is, we are the parent of the AI. And that AI should want to, I don't know, does that make sense?
It does, but I hope that that's the case.
Well, so much research. It's definitely for us, the public, the general public, which is new for us. This has been out for quite a while. It's one of those things that I think will require research. Now, most research back in the day, you look at when we were going through school, it was like 80 years of research, 60 years of research. Things are moving so quickly that research is, it's got to go quickly. And so we're not able to see the extent of the consequences because of change used to be so slow. I think of course you have the Industrial Revolution, but think of how slow some of those things.
Oh, yeah.
I just got back from Guatemala, and I asked a driver who was a native, I said, why aren't they putting tractors on the field to get their crops sooner and get it going? He goes, they're not interested in that. They're not interested in that mass amount of production. They want to have a job to go to every day, a routine, something to do, see the sun in the morning with their God, and go home by 3. They work every day, he said. Sunday to Sunday.
You know what's interesting you say that is I have this philosophy a little bit, me personally, about where the world's going to go. I think we'll have a global aspect to it. A little part of me has this little bit on the back of my thought where, do we go back to that? Like what Guatemala is saying is where I know that my neighbor down the street, they might make T-shirts or they might grow a crop. I could go and buy it at a local grocery store, but I know, or let's say they make tennis shoes and they make these homemade products. I know that child slavery is not involved and all these things aren't involved. I can buy it within my local community, and I know what's sprayed on them. I know what kind of, I know the person, I know what you make, I know the product that you put out. I can trust in that. But the fact is, sometimes when we're ordering online or we do some of these big things, we don't know where or what that came from. So do we go to a globalized world, but inset in that is more localized? Do you follow me? So like companies maybe like these smaller, like these companies that aren't, you have big companies right now like Amazon, but maybe it's like an Etsy, right? Yeah. Like that might be big in the future where I make these things and I sell it to the local people.
That's a tough one because I think you'd have to educate people, right? Yeah. And education is not in the interest of the media. I mean, the media is not there to educate you, right? That's who gets to the mass. You have politicians that get in the way of a lot of those things. And then you have a mindset of convenience that we talked about earlier about our kids growing up in this culture of convenience. Like, why would I want a fresh meal? I can just put this in the microwave for 2 minutes and keep moving.
That's good.
Right.
And so when you have convenience in there, I think as humans in our nature, we have our selfishness, but one of them is convenience. Yeah. And America has embraced convenience. Like, how can I make this more convenient for you? Even though it's not good for you, but it's convenient. And so the convenient translates into good. And I always think good is going to be the enemy of great. Yeah. Right?
Absolutely.
And so you have this cycle that it's through education, you can break some of that, but this is constant education showing people how to think for themselves. And what's AI doing? Helping you think so you don't have to think for yourself, which is what TV did. So, I mean, it's going to be, that's one of the things that I struggle with at home, and I try to get my kids to understand that critical thinking needs to get back, in full force, because then we are able to think for ourselves and go, you know what, I'm paying more, but the reason behind I won't do that. Or in these people, I think more than education, it's their culture, and their culture's stronger. But the U.S. is made up of multiple cultures, right? So it slowly deteriorates, and I think it will globally. I can see the Guatemalans already, like you said, with cell phones.
Yeah, we go to Guatemala as well, so
that's changing, but it's a slower change. Yeah, we're way further in out than that. So
I think you're 100% right about. I'll be curious if there is, and what I hope for is this generation that maybe steps back a little bit from some of the stuff that we embrace, because the fact is that social media hasn't been around that long,
right?
And I'm wondering if we're going to make choices, and these kids are going to make choices maybe to not embrace it as much as we did because it was new to us, but they were born with it, so maybe it's something you kind of have hope for this,
Yeah, you'd hope so. Yeah.
What advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs that want to make a difference?
That want to make a difference. And so we're talking entrepreneurs just getting started in their business now. Mm-hmm. They want to make a difference. Naturally, I'll tell you that it's, as a marketer, I love research, right? You have to research, because I've seen people go into a market where it's saturated. And going into a saturated market, you might have a great product, but then they end up failing because they went into a saturated market. And you have people who have a terrible product, but there isn't much around, and so they became successful with a bad product. because the market was ready for that, right? And so for an entrepreneur, I think they need to do their research and make sure that the research embraces looking at the competition, understanding the market, looking at pricing, looking at promotion, and I would say very, very important is who is going to be your support group. Yeah. I had a lot of support around me, and I know firmly that without that support, we're not sitting here. Right. And it goes back to the team playing. Like, I saw the Michael Jordan interview, right? Yeah. And he said it clear. Jordan doesn't exist without Pippen. Those were his words, somewhere around there, right? And I believe that, I don't know exactly why it's hard for people to ask for help. I don't know if it's pride or they forget, but ask for help. Yeah. Everywhere you go, ask for help.
That's good. So that's really good. Take that to the bank. Yeah.
So what is it you're struggling with? What am I not good at? Ask for help.
Embrace the community and people around you.
Yes. Yeah. And they will help you. I mean, I can't share a story where I've asked for help and someone said no. Right. And, as an entrepreneur, you have so many questions. So, and I would say ask for help and take, like Paul said, right, take the best. But some of it you might say, not for me. It's okay. And come out with your own product, right? Be original, be yourself, continue through that entrepreneur, but understand that the more people you get involved in a prudent way, it's going to be, something that they can build on.
Awesome.
That's good.
I want to go back a little bit to your family.
Yes.
How do you achieve work-life balance?
Oh, yes. That would be the Achilles, I think, of entrepreneur and business people. We were just talking earlier about money isn't all. And I very much embraced that at the beginning of when I started this. My goal was never to have more money, but to have more time. That's good. So yes, my goal was to have enough to pay for my bills. I don't want to go in debt, but my ultimate goal was to have time. And then me joining theology was to be able to help more. It was never to make more money. Right. And so I was able to understand that if I would have built the business while my kids are growing up, my success would have truly hit about 10, 15 years later. If we call economic success, right? Not true success. That's when your kids are growing up. Right. You have to think of that and go, okay, now we're doing really well financially, but I don't know my kids. Right. I don't, I didn't spend time with them. And so I said, I'm going to do it. Yeah, I'm going to do it the other way around. I don't need a lot right now. I don't know if it's because I'm from Honduras and I saw people who were just happy and joyful with little. Yeah. That I kind of embraced that as well. Like, do we really need everything? I looked at a film that said 100 years ago we had, and I'm guessing here, but let's say 10,000 items in a household, and now we're close to 100,000 items in a household.
Isn't that wild?
And people were happy and running around. So I used that as a balance, and I spent so much time with my kids and my wife, and we traveled and did all these cool things. So for me, I feel like I accomplished that. To me was my accomplishment. It wasn't necessarily the growing the business, but I did get that time I looked for. And of course, I put in the time when I was in college, when I was starting the business. Definitely there was a time there. But now, as the kids get older, I would say 7 years from now, maybe 8, I'll probably either be pushing more the business, but I also want to get into the nonprofit world. That's still in my to help other entrepreneurs, help other business people, all that.
Well, it sounds like to me it's like you value your time. Oh yeah. Because all money is an agreement of time. If I pay somebody to come over and cut my grass, guess what I don't have to do tonight? Cut my grass. Right. So now I take 2 hours. I'm literally taking 2 hours or hour and a half of their life. That's mine now. Right. But in turn, I'm paying them money, which I had to get somehow, right? With like doing whatever I do, real estate. I had to sell them. I had to give them 2 hours of my time. So really, all money is a give and take of people's time, and it's just in the form of a dollar bill. That's all really, in my mind, that's all money is. So you recognize if I have enough to where I can spend time with my family, that's the most important thing. And then in the future, and I always kind of pick on it, when you first come out of high school, your time, or when you're young, your time's worth minimum wage.
Yeah.
Nobody can deny that. You don't have anything going on. You know, you're young. Your time is not worth much. Mm-hmm. But as you, when you start to develop skills, you're 18, maybe you get a degree, you're 22, 23, 24 years old. Now your time becomes a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Where I think, which there's not really, for most people won't maybe agree with this, but I do. Once you have kids, your time becomes so worth so much more. You're like, but you didn't add more value to yourself. True, but at the same time, I'm not going to take now away from my family unless X amount it's worth my time, because I want to be with my family.
Yeah.
And you start to realize that now my time substantially became more valuable, just to be able in taking away. So when somebody wants and to take time away from me, it's like, okay, it better be valuable, because otherwise I want to spend time either with the people I'm mentoring, or that includes obviously my family, but it's also people within, you know, my people, right? It could be church, it could be wherever I'm spending time with. So it's, to me, when I recognize that really money isn't real, it's just an agreement, an exchange of time back and forth.
Yes.
That's and I'm kind of hearing that's what you're saying.
Well, it's what it is, right? We have our life here on earth, and that has to be the highest value when it comes to, if you look at it as a currency, right? I mean, you know, not in priorities, but what you have. No one goes to their deathbed and says, "Man, I wish I would have made an extra $1 million." You know, it's always, and then we talked about generations where that money ends up. There's a lot of studies that say by the third or fourth generation, it goes back.
Or they say sandals to flip flops within, or flip flops to sandals within 3 generations.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, definitely time is very valuable. So for me, that was the key. Can I make more time, and that was the goal, and we were able to hit it. So that was awesome. Yeah.
So if there's somebody out there listening to today, and they want to get in touch with you, how do they find you, Carlos?
I'd say LinkedIn is probably a great way of touching base with me. Of course, through our company, through CIS Agency.
Say that LinkedIn again? What was that?
With CIS Agency.
Okay, cool. Okay.
And I would say LinkedIn is a good way of touching base. I try to make myself available for conferences and, you know, being able to help out students or whatnot. But I would say LinkedIn is probably the best way of communicating.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we'll have that link posted for you guys, so you guys could reach out to him, and I highly recommend giving him a call.
Yeah.
Even just at the very least, to chat with him. He's, like you said, you guys are hearing a lot about, like, where he's been, and that experience just doesn't come overnight. And that's one of the things I think that typically people believe is it doesn't come, the gain doesn't come without the pain. Right. And you've been through some stuff, traveling back and forth to different countries, which is wild. So again, I highly recommend reaching out to him and talking to him.
So if you're joining us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. And you can also find us on all of the podcast platforms as well. So, Carlos, we have something really fun that we do here at the Shoreline Show. Okay. And it is the message in a bottle. So our last guest left a message in there for you. Okay. So you can grab that bottle and find out what the message is.
Perfect. Uh-oh. All the questions were a breeze. Let's see.
It might be the challenge same. It would be interesting if it would be the same question.
That's true.
It might be. We'll find out.
That's true. Let's see what we have. Oh boy, this is interesting. It says, what is the biggest lie that you tell yourself? That's a tough question. We're talking vulnerability here. What is the biggest lie you tell yourself? I have a funny one because it's the one I can think of right now, but it's you're going to get up early tomorrow morning. I have a really hard time getting up early, and I, you know, I'm like, tomorrow's the day. Tomorrow I'm going to get up early. I like to follow through. Yeah. You know, that's definitely in my personality, but getting up early is not in my genes. What is a lie? I would say the second one is, and it's I don't know if it's a lie, but I've tried to expand the company. Mm-hmm. And I'm not truly all the way committed. Mm-hmm. Mainly because of my family. We talked about the time. Mm-hmm. And so I do feel like I know deep down how long and how much effort it's going to take. And that's me taking away time from my family. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, if I'm honest, I've been trying to expand through shortcuts. Mm-hmm. And it's backfired. Mm-hmm. Because it takes a lot to get a second establishment. Mm-hmm. You think now that, oh, you know what, I have the resources, I have the money, I have it's hard to start a whole nother agency somewhere else. Yeah. And so I think I've come to the conclusion that that is probably going to have to wait until further down the line when I don't have to spend that much more, not that it's a sacrifice, but I love spending time with my family, but that's the reality. Yeah. So I would say that's a tough question.
So I would say the lie would be, just to sum it up, would be that you don't believe that you could have be a world class husband, rock star dad, and a world class building. Right. Yeah, that would be the lie. Yeah. Which in theory, you could.
You can.
Here's my take, similar to what I learned in Guatemala, is I don't know if I want it.
Right.
That's good. Now
right.
That's good.
Yeah. Because I can get another tractor, mm-hmm. and I can triple our business.
Yeah.
At the cost of what?
Yeah.
And I look at what some needs are, right? What is it do I really need? I look at, as a culture, you look at Honduras, a lot of them, for them, success is having a car. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what they look. That's in their mind. And I'm not speaking for all Hondurans, but just in general. Yeah. Once they achieve a car and they can drive there and forth, I've got my car. That's success. And if you're still riding the bus, you're still you're not successful. That's the way they see it. Of course, I don't agree with it necessarily, but I look at the West Michigan culture, and I look at what is successful to them. Yeah. And what I've noticed is a cottage, a boat, and your house, right? Your big house. Yeah. And so those aren't my goals. And because those aren't my goals, of course, to get some of those goals, you need to be financially stable to have those goals. Mm-hmm. But to me, they're not there. And so I'm like, I look at, finances. Of course, I want to continue and be investing smartly. Hey. So I'm trying to expand my portfolio, but not necessarily more, materialistic things. And I'm not saying those people are material.
Some stuff right now that most people need to hear. I think you're really hitting something that is very I'm hearing some pretty strong leadership out of you that you a lot of people won't admit that it's just, we're all trained to say, I want more.
Right.
I want better. Mm-hmm. I want a bigger house. I want a nicer car. I want a cottage. Right. But enough is enough at some point. And you're like, I want a good family, and that's what I want, and I have it.
Well, and I would also say, if you do have those things, number one, good for you. And if those were your true goals, like that's what you wanted, awesome.
Yeah. 100%.
But chasing someone else's dream is more of what I wouldn't like. Okay, that's the West Michigan way of saying, but that's not my dream. So I'm gonna choose to follow what I feel like what is success. To me. Good. Success is traveling, and that's expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
Really
like
expensive.
I'm not saying don't wait. Use your money. Don't do this. But that's the way I saw. Like, what do I like doing with what's my thing? My thing is, get our whole family and let's go to another country and let's learn their culture. Let's learn their food. Let's spend. I'll get one hotel room on purpose and say, sorry guys, and we're all together and we're this little family. They're all. And so, of course, it gets crazy sometimes, but at the same time, they'll remember those things.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
And so to me, that's where I see this. That's what I wanted, right? Yeah. Will I later in life get a cottage? Maybe. Yeah. But that's not my ultimate goal. If I don't have that now, I can sleep at night, and there's awesome people that share their cottages that, you know, I'll Airbnb a cottage, or, you know, you can still have that, but it's definitely, that's not my bar. That's
I love that. Yeah. That's awesome. That's good. Yeah.
Awesome.
You're definitely a strong leader. That's good.
Yeah.